Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Public incentives overview.
All right, Andrew, she's all
All
yours.
right.
I'll shut up.
All righty. I wanted to welcome everyone to our Getting the Most Out of Public Incentives webinar. In developing this webinar, we hope to discuss the opportunity zones and other public incentives from federal, state, and local governments, being that they are excellent tools to help us in our growth and economic growth and facilitate that economic growth for these businesses. We want to share information from anything from tax incentives all the way down to tax credits and grants and loans and support programs, as well as state and local incentives. The webinar is not meant to be a one and done. We're going to actually attempt to put on other webinars following up on some of the information that we share today. Today's webinar is just basically an overview of all of those public incentives that we wanted to discuss, and we'll discuss them in at later points in greater detail. This webinar is being recorded, and I wanted to mention that to everyone. We actually have a YouTube channel for TexAmericas Center, and we will share that webinar on our YouTube channel when we're finished. One of the things I wanted to mention too is for any of those people that have questions during this webinar presentation, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll manage that chat box during the presentation. And at the end, when we get to our question and answer period, we will actually answer all of those questions that are in that chat box. With that being said, I think we're very fortunate, absolutely fortunate to have the ability to put together a panel of experts such as we have here today. And I wanted to just go ahead and introduce those experts. One of them I work closely with, Mr. Eric Boyles. He's our TexAmericas Center Executive Vice President and Chief Economic Development Officer. And we are fortunate enough, me and Eric, to make the acquaintance of David Katopody, and he is the Director of Integrated Consulting Services for Katopody, LLC. With that being said, I'm ready to go ahead and turn the floor over to David Katopody, and he can begin our presentations whenever he gets ready.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew. I realized no one introduced you, so I'm going to introduce you, Andrew. So Andrew is the Vice President of Finance for TexAmericas Center, and Andrew is the one who kind of initially reached out to me about opportunity zones. And our firm, Katopody, we've been working in the opportunity zone space and a number of tax credit spaces for several decades. Our principals have. I kind of fell into Katopody LLC after finishing my studies, which were in geophysics and geology, and I applied a lot of that looking at spatial information, which opportunity zones are a part of, and started work as a site selection consultant in both opportunity zones and other tax credits. So I'm kind of a generalist with a lot of different skill sets and knowledge, and one of the exciting things about working with TexAmericas Center is just the place of TexAmericas Center and where we are as a country and where we are in industrialization. So Texas, this is my view, Texas is a nexus of North American reindustrialization. What does that mean? Well, everything that we're hearing about the decline of China, the reshoring of critical manufacturing, defense and energy investment domestically, doing the IRA Act, all these incentives are available to build up our industrial base. And why is that happening? Well, we'll go right into it. So I want to just give a little bit of an overview of economic activity. This is relative economic growth over the last decade, 2012 to 2019. And the basic thought here is that things are pretty stable. For the most part, growth is uniformly spread out across the continent. We are still benefiting from the tail end of the last 40 years, which really started in the 80s and extended into the 2010s. And things really changed with the pandemic, which accelerated the end of those trends. And what I think is really striking is starting in 2020 and continuing to today, we're seeing a leveling off of growth, especially in northern cities, especially areas connected to Canada. And we're seeing increased growth in areas connected to Mexico. And what's really intriguing to me is that the Mexico-Texas economic unit really looks part of the same thing. And so that's really important for the United States because Mexico is now becoming our most important economic partner in areas of manufacturing, in areas of other industry, in areas of energy. If you just look at the Gulf of Mexico now, between the Permian Basin, the offshore Gulf, and northern Mexico Gulf energy reserves, it's becoming one of the most important energy resources in the hemisphere. So we're really at a different time. The last 40 years were really about globalization, global trade. We're really seeing a pullback and a focus on not necessarily just domestic, but domestic and close neighbors and close allies that the United States is really focusing trade relations with. And Mexico is a really important part of that. So there's this push amongst the government, amongst energy industry, even the technology and venture capital guys are getting in on what's called reindustrialization technology. And the whole idea is setting up the industrial base of the U.S. for success over the next century. And that includes innovating a lot of new technologies, especially related to energy efficiency, advanced manufacturing, setting up the new supply chains that are required to move all these new things. And we're going through all those growing pains. And the kind of big deal is that there's a lot of incentives available to facilitate this from public funds, and there's a lot of interest from investment professionals and the investment industry to support products, services that are solving this problem. So now we're transitioning into talking about all that reindustrialization, reshoring. What does it have to do with TexAmericas Center? Well, as we discussed, a lot of the economic activity on the continent is being driven from Texas and Mexico. And if you want to move anything from Texas and northern Mexico to the Northeast, to the Midwest, you have to go through Texarkana, and TexAmericas Center is right there. And Eric, I'm hoping you can chime in with some more information on TexAmericas. This is my lead-in for you.
Absolutely. So I think the big piece is that TexAmericas Center is recognized as being a premier industrial park in the United States. We've received that designation now for 5 years from Business Facilities Magazine. The last 2 years, we've been ranked the third best industrial park in the country by that magazine. Just this year, Union Pacific made us one of their focus sites, which is a recognition that we have a number one, rail served by the Union Pacific, but also have qualified shovel ready property, and that connections to the UP have been researched, and we are a known entity within their system and a location that they want to refer business to. Another interesting thing about our organization is that we're a hybrid. We're a mixture of municipality, economic development organization, private industrial development and management company, as well as a logistics service provider. We provide 3PL as well as rail logistics services. So what does that mean? Well, that means we focus on speed to market because of our unique ability to bring those attributes to bear on a client's needs. We are the authority having jurisdiction over our property. So we control our own zoning, permitting, occupancy, and platting. That means that we can save a project that chooses to come onto our property months of public sector review. As you're working with our PE, who is our COO, and he's learning more about your project, what your needs are, we actually reach a point where once your project's ready to move forward, once he signs off on it, you're ready to break ground and move forward. Or as soon as the ground is purchased or the lease is signed, you can begin your operations. There's not an elongated public review process. The other piece of that is because of the integration of the logistics capabilities into our organization, we can offer things like what we call a quick start. Which means that basically you set up a forward operating position here. We get your logistics activities going and then work with you to transition into manufacturing. We can do a flex lease around that, either through the contract or through the real estate and marketing lease side of things. But probably the best component of it is the scalability of it. So because we have the ability to help a company as they start to produce, grow through our real estate, our services. When you reach a point where you need to have a solution for an expansion because you just picked up a big contract, we have the ability to help make that happen. And because it's managed on a contract basis, we can do it for 30 days. We can do it for 90 days. We can do an elongated component too. You thought you were only going to need 30 days, but it winds up going to 90. Then at 90, you realize you need it for a full year. Or maybe you thought you were going to need it for 90 and you need to cut it back because another contract fell out of running, and you now have that excess capacity. So our ability to really help a company scale as they are trying to achieve permanent growth really sets us apart. Now, all of that allows the company to focus on speed to market and speed to profit for themselves. One of the questions that people often want to know is, but you're an economic development group. Do you really have the capabilities of doing these things? Well, we have 150 years worth of service experience in economic development, business, logistics, with the key management team that's here. Next slide. Next slide, David.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to add in, Eric, is
go ahead.
Talking about your the hybrid organization advantages. A lot of times, and I work with a lot of economic development entities, and I love them. They're great, but having an organization that is motivated to get a project done and bring it to market is something that's pretty unique. It's not really as much as a political game like it is in many municipalities, because the TexAmericas Center is so mission focused, which is something that's a little different than what you might find elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I'll put it this way, and I tell prospects this all the time on our discovery call. We're more like you than a traditional economic development group, because we have to be focused on growing revenue, because I'm not tax supported. So, I use the term "we eat what we kill" all the time. If we're not growing revenues, if we're not providing fee for service activity, or we're not selling land, then the lights go off and no one gets to buy Christmas presents. And I think pretty much everyone that's listening in knows exactly what I'm saying. So thank you, David. That's a really nice point that needed to be expressed.
Great.
All right. So as you're looking at our best fit industries, a little bit about the Texarkana region. Our labor market is a little bit more unique. Everyone's worried about availability. We are a small market. There's no doubt about that. Texarkana, Texas is 35,000 people. Texarkana, Arkansas is probably around 34,000 people. So, we're approaching 70,000 people in the combined cities, but you don't see that when you look at our market. The other piece is the next closest labor markets are quite a distance from us. Dallas is 160 miles to our west, Little Rock's 160 miles to our east. To get up to the Walmart land with Fort Smith and Bentonville, Fayetteville, that's 190 plus miles. The closest major cities to us that make us look like more of a traditional market are going to be to our south, where you have Shreveport, Longview, and Tyler, all 75 to 110 miles from us. What does that mean? Well, that means that it is more economical to drive to Texarkana from about a 75-mile radius than it is to drive to the other markets. We know that's true because when you look at commuting patterns for Bowie County, the second largest group of people who are driving here are driving 50 to 75 miles. 22.9% of the employees in Bowie County, which is where we're located, are driving that distance to work and driving that distance home. What does that mean in terms of total market size? Well, at 75 miles, we got 1.2 million people living in that market. So that's a labor force of about 550 to maybe 600,000 people. When you start to look at the numbers, the unemployment rate is a total number of people available of about 20,000 plus people. The underemployment, we get that number from Chimera in partnership with Workforce Solutions. The total number of people that are available there, also just above 20,000 people. The number of people, because we don't create enough quality jobs in the Texarkana area, the number of people that are driving out of our labor market to jobs in Dallas, Little Rock, Shreveport, Fort Smith, that number's over 70,000 people. So we have about 120,000 people who probably are looking for a better paying quality job than what they're currently in. So that labor market is extensive. The other is the availability of industrial capacity utilities. From an electricity standpoint, within about 2.5 miles of our property is a 69 kV line, a 138 kV line, and 345 kV lines. So we know that we can deliver over 350 megawatts to a project. From a natural gas standpoint, there's an interstate gas line that runs adjacent to our property, 10-inch, 250 PSI. So the ability to deliver copious amounts of natural gas also is pretty easy. From a water standpoint, we have 1.7 million gallons of water per day available on the property today. And we will be building, not we, our partner, Riverbend Water Resource District, will be breaking ground on a new 30 million gallon plant that will be available by 2027 on our footprint, which is also going to bring a new commodity, which is going to be, or utility, which is going to be raw water. And then from a sewer standpoint, our current sewer treatment plant, which is on our footprint, has a capacity of 1.5 million gallons a day and is expandable by about 750,000 because the plant was designed to allow for 750,000 gallon incremental expansions. And finally, we are fiber capable. We have 144 strand data center quality fiber on the footprint. From a transportation perspective, part of the reason why we have such a large and diverse best fit industries is that we have 3 interstates, 4 U.S. highways, 2 Class 1 railroads that run through Texarkana, our own regional commercial airport, Texarkana Regional, but within 2.5 miles, you have 3, or 2.5 hours, you have 3 additional DFW, Little Rock, and Shreveport airports. We have 1 river port we have access to that's 75 miles away. And then we have all the seaports down on the Gulf, the closest being about a 5-hour drive, which is Port of Houston. And then finally, we have access to multiple inland ports, with the closest being back in Dallas. Next slide. It's just a sampling of some of the recent wins. I'm just going to pick a couple and talk about how we've utilized some of the services to help these projects move forward. First one I'm going to pick is Rocasa Organics. This is a hometown company Just an incredible story. I think Rocasa got started in the owner's kitchen, and she started making supplements because she and her family had health issues that she couldn't find things that they could consume that helped them get better. And so she was researching, different homeopathic cures that she could make for her family. At church, she's telling people about what's happening. She's getting some notoriety around it. People start saying, "Hey, could you let me try that?" Well, they start affecting other people's health positively. And next thing you know, she's making and making and making for everyone that she knows. At some point, her husband said, "You have to start charging for this." And so she does. And she starts selling products. Well, she takes over the spare bedroom. She then says, "I'm going to take over the garage." Her husband says, "No way, you're not taking over my garage." And so she finds a kitchen at a local church that she's able to move in and start using as an incubator. It's 500 square feet. And at the time that we found her through a referral from a local banker that could not finance her project, they had grown to the point where they could no longer tear down, and the church was telling them they had to move out because they couldn't do their Sunday dinners. And we had a 4,750 square foot building that we wound up putting almost $300,000 worth of improvements to in order to expand this company that was less than 12 months old into. No one would have taken that kind of risk on it. We did. And within 6 months, the company had grown to the point where they had completely utilized this. I'll round it up to 5,000 square foot building. We then started assisting them on the logistics side through our 3PL operations. So that they could keep expanding in the building, we started handling receiving and shipping. We then helped them set up another manufacturing location through the 3PL operation under contract. They outgrew that operation. We can move them from that 4,000 square foot building into a 6,000 square foot building. They outgrew that, and then we moved and they took back over that other 4,000 square foot. Long story short, they wound up buying a 24,000 square foot building from us, which they are now rehabbing and starting to move operations into. Just a perfect example of how we can scale with a company, offer flexible contracts and lease arrangements. I'll mention XPAL is kind of similar. It's a foreign direct investment Spanish company. They were pursuing federal contracts. We were able to help that company get going by allowing them to lease one office in a building so they had an address here. They began pursuing the federal contracts. They won $150 million worth of contracts, and we were able then to help them move into the buildings that they ultimately would move or expand into. But we started with them leasing 5,000 square feet in the building because that's all they actually needed out of a 25,000 square foot structure to begin operations. As they expanded, they took over the entire building. They're in over 180,000 square feet now. I'll mention Palmer International real quick. Palmer International was a company we were working with, looking to expand. They're currently they headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, and they had found a ideal spot here to build a brand new building. It was probably going to cost them $10-15 million. We had an existing biodiesel plant that had been mothballed. Everything that they just kept telling us that they needed, I just kept looking at that building and say it's already standing there. And so I reached out to the corporate real estate side of that corporation. We found out that they would sell the building for less than $5 million. It didn't help us, but we helped that company get up and operational for far less than they could have done by building. We made the referral, they bought the building, and they've continued to grow and expand here. The other is, this is a defense project, Lockheed Martin. The Red River Army Depot leases 256,000 square feet from us. Lockheed Martin needed the depot to provide a certain amount of business tied to the multiple launch rocket system activity that they're doing over in Camden, Arkansas. And we needed to approve a sublease, which is something we don't normally do. We don't want to compete against ourselves on projects. But we not only did we agree to the sublease, but we also wound up making improvements to the building for the company. They've now been operational in the facility for over 5 years. But it's a great addition to the overall campus. Back to you, David.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. It's a great overview of some of the wins and activities of TexAmericas Center. I'm going to talk a little bit and align somewhat with some of the industries and what you said when we talk about public incentives. So kind of the backdrop that I'd like to bring you back to is that there's this big push in the country to reindustrialize, to reshore, to bring manufacturing, especially where it touches defense and energy, back to the U.S. And there's a number of incentives available. Some are federal, some are state and local. And we'll start with the federal. So federal incentives, they pretty much come in a couple different flavors, but tax credits is a big one, tax incentives, and grants, loans, and support programs. So we'll start off with federal tax credits. Federal tax credits are kind of the most rules-heavy incentives available, but they're also one of the major tools that the government uses to incentivize investment. And basically how tax credit works is the owner of a business gets a one-to-one tax credit against their tax liability. And so typically how you see these tax credit incentives work is you'll have an equity investor come in, invest in a business, and that investor will receive the benefits of the tax credit. Sometimes you can have a direct use of tax credits. We've seen that sometimes. But the major tax credits that TexAmericas Center and clients can benefit from are the new markets tax credits, the renewable energy investment tax credits, and the 48C tax credits. So the new markets tax credit is an economic development tool for communities that are underdeveloped, and this is a tax credit that basically is utilized by the business. So you have a community development entity that funds projects that drive economic growth, and that's one of the, if you were on for the previous webinar that TexAmericas Center did, we talked all about new markets tax credits, and we can talk about them again in a future time. But the key thing about the new markets tax credit is that it goes down to the community development entity and then funds the business. The 48C tax credit is a new tax credit that's came about as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And the 48C tax credit is kind of an odd duck. It's basically right now the Department of Energy has a open solicitation for 48C tax credit projects. So if you do anything that remotely touches any type of energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, advanced clean energy manufacturing, you can submit a white paper for a 48C tax credit. Right now they're in their second tranche, and my understanding is that there's gonna be a third one. Excuse me. But but the administration is going to be desperate to spend a lot of these 48C tax credit monies. Sorry about that. The last tax credit is the renewable energy investment tax credit, and this credit goes to the building developer. And so whereas the new markets tax credit and the 48C tax credit go to the business, the renewable energy investment tax credit is for things like putting solar panels and other types of energy efficiency and energy reduction technologies into the building. And so you have a couple different ways to integrate these together, which we will talk about. Next up is the federal tax incentives, and there's only one thing that kind of qualifies as an incentive because it's not really a program, it's just a unique part of the tax code, opportunity zones. So opportunity zones were made as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 to encourage investment and excuse me, one sec. To encourage investment in underserved communities. And basically what the incentive allows is for an investor to invest in a project, and after holding an investment for 10 years, they can exit that investment without any capital gains. So if you have capital gains, you can invest in a qualified opportunity zone business, and if you wait 10 years, you can exit that business without capital gains tax. So if you invest in a startup that, for example, Row Casa Organics, if you were to invest in that type of company and your equity went up by 10 times over the course of 10 years, well, now you can exit for that equity without capital gains tax. So it's a really attractive incentive for incentivizing investment, and there's really never been anything like it. And once the program expires, we may not see it again. And so there's some calls to extend and renew it, but we'll see if that happens. Right now, the horizon for the opportunity zone incentive is closing. All right, next we have the industrial base DoD and DOE support programs. And these are kind of more official ones. You have to submit white papers. There's a couple, many different directives, and there's also several, not blank check programs, but call for proposals, new initiatives coming online. But these are the more long-standing ones. There's the Defense Production Act title program. There's the Manufacturing Technology program. There's the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, the Advanced Materials Office, Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, DOE loans programs, SBIR and STTR programs. And just, again, if you're touching anything remotely in energy or defense, these offices and programs offer solicitations for proposals, and this is where you can qualify for certain types of grants, guaranteed loans, and other things of that nature. And so those really cover the federal incentives available for advanced manufacturing, energy, technology, and these are, and that we've identified as a good fit for TexAmericas Center. Next, we've got the state and local assistance and incentives, and Eric, I think you can chime in on kind of some of the advantages that TexAmericas Center offers with some of the state and local incentives and programs.
Absolutely. So I think the piece that I want to kind of leave everyone with is if you knew TexAmericas Center, 10 years ago, we really didn't have a toolbox of incentives. So we've worked very hard, specifically our CEO, to really bring a substantial number of incentives to the table that can benefit projects of really any type and size and scale. Before I jump into some of those, I just want to mention, we put together a fairly comprehensive list of the various types of federal, state, and local assistance and incentives. You can find that on our website, but it's an incentive summary document. Some of those items I'll walk through here now. If you're bringing a project to us, when we provide a cover letter back to you, we can provide a very high overview of what the state incentives potentially could be through a partnership we've worked out with Scout Economics, where they can predict a potential state incentive amount by a range just given jobs and investment numbers. But finally, on that, and you'll read that in our incentive summary if you look at it, we do pride ourselves on having a consultant that we work with who can develop an incentive letter. He'll be able to look at not necessarily the federal incentives, but the state and local incentives, and give you a good understanding of the ones that you should be able to apply for and when. You'll decide which ones you want to truly go for. But then he does the analysis on what those numbers should be based upon the data you provide us in our intake forms. And so therefore, we can provide you a number, if we are shortlisted on what those incentives might be. But a list of some of the incentives, special zones that we currently have the ability. We are a Defense Economic Readjustment Zone. We are U.S. Foreign Trade Zone number 255. We're the grantee. We're no longer a hub zone, but we do have a hub zone company on our footprint, so you can partner with them to achieve hub zone benefits, new market tax credits, opportunity zone, Texas Enterprise Zone, Texas Reinvestment Zone. Our county, Bowie County, is a PACE program. Tax abatements, we offer goods in transit tax exemption. We currently do not offer Freeport tax exemption, but it's something that we are working to try to get. We're waiting to have a project that wants Freeport tax exemption, and we will approach all of the projects or all of the taxing bodies to pursue that. We have the ability to offer local property tax abatements through Texarkana College, Bowie County. I should say, again, we are the authority having jurisdiction, so there's no municipal tax at all. So look at that as a 100% property tax abatement on all municipal taxes and fees for the lifetime of your presence on our footprint. You can get the Texas Research Development Tax Credit here, pollution control equipment incentive, franchise tax exemption, and deduction for business headquarters relocations if you choose. We've had a few headquarters relocations in recent years, so it's something that's maybe becoming a little bit more possible. We offer utility exemptions. AEP SWEPCO, the electricity provider, will offer a economic development rider if you meet the appropriate amount of job creation. And then some of the skill training type programs with Skill Development Fund, on the job training, and then some local things that we do under what we call our Come Home to Texarkana program. We've worked out an agreement with Texas A&M University where they will, for any employee that you have start to take classes at A&M, the first class is free and all follow-up classes are 25% off. And so we have some interesting things that we've put together here that you're not going to see anywhere else. But that's kind of an overview of some of the incentives that we have, and I'll happy to answer any more questions about that. And again, the incentive summary is online on our website, or we can send that to you if you put a note in the chat box that you want it. But back to you, David.
Great. Well, now we're kind of entering the phase of, we've talked about, here are all these marbles, here are all these incentives available. This is all these things that we can do from the federal level, state and local, what's going on in the general economic environment. How do we bring it all together? And how do we, mechanically, how does this work? And what does it look like? And Eric, you outlined this slide, just some examples, I think, about, for large capital projects, what sort of incentives we would employ, looking at opportunity zones, the JEDI program, expediting permits, and all the way down to, smaller investments and a lot of the things that you've already mentioned here. So these are kind of more of what we've discussed. And I wanted to get to just a little bit about how do we actually combine all this stuff together. And after that, we'll get into why I think, and we think, TexAmericas Center is a great partner to help implement a lot of these. So just a quick example, say your core operating business receives tax credits, grants, or Department of Energy, DOD, and/or loans to help support your business. So the core operating business owners receive direct tax benefits if they get tax credits, or the business gets some money or subsidized loan to continue operations and make operations happen, be that a loan for research and development of a new technology or standing up a critical facility for defense or energy. So this is something that kind of helps the business itself. Now, if you're located within an opportunity zone, which is something that we highly recommend that any business owner utilize this incentive. If you're starting up a business, or maybe you're looking at opening a new location or moving to TexAmericas Center, we'd highly encourage you to do this as an opportunity zone business, because it means that your equity will be shielded from capital gains tax in the future. So that means that if you take advantage of this, your owners, including investors, will be able to shield their capital gains from taxes, in addition to all the benefits that the business has in its continuing operations, being within TexAmericas Center and receiving any other incentives on operational costs. Because the opportunity zone incentive only comes into play when you sell. Prior to that point, the business has to operate as a real business, and it has to, like Eric said, it has to eat what it kills. And so an opportunity zone can't make a business that is not making good revenue a good business. It has to be a good business in itself, and the opportunity zone is this booster on capital gains that helps you and bring into to a certain location. Now, the other piece of this, and this is kind of what Eric got to, is some of these incentives don't really benefit the business directly. They're actually tied to property. And so in the example of a business that needs a new building, well, you could have a separate investor come in and build a building for a business or renovate a building for a business. And that building could receive tax credits as well, with renewable energy tax credits and other types of tax credits, such as 48C or new markets tax credits. And that really benefits the real property owner. So that gives you a little taste of, well, this is not just all these tax credits going into a business. There's a whole ecosystem of partnerships that happens in utilizing some of these incentives. And that's just something that we will go into in a lot more detail in future webinars. But with that, I think based on my conversations with Eric and Andrew, based on everything that Eric has spoken about in this webinar, TexAmericas Center is really an ideal partner for companies looking for industrial footprints in the southern U.S. You have an entity that has control over a lot of the permitting processes, that is motivated to help deliver for you, and has a mandate for economic development on their property. And so if you're remotely interested in locating in this area, I highly recommend talking with TexAmericas Center and seeing how many of these incentives you can bring to bear on a project. Again, not every incentive is going to make sense, and talking with staff and seeing which types of incentives make sense for your business are important. But there's certain parts of this that, looking back and realizing that, hey, we could have taken advantage of something, such as the opportunity zones incentive that I'm very familiar with. That's really one that, if you're doing it, you really should consider it, especially given that you're going to have property tax incentives associated with the JEDI program and other things that are just going to be automatic. So with that, Eric, did you have anything else to add?
Just a quick comment on that JEDI program. So the way that JEDI program is designed to work in the state of Texas is that a project only has to pay half of what its taxable liability is. And so the benefit of being in an opportunity zone is that the project only has to pay 25% of what its taxable value is. Now, there's some qualifying pieces. For us, the project has to be over a $20 million investment because we're rural. But if you go into a big city, you got to spend a lot more money to get access to it. So some of the rural attributes, again, make a lot of sense for us. And we didn't even talk about access to USDA business and industry programs that we have access to because we're considered rural, even though we have a very large labor market. But I think that's an important piece to layer against that opportunity zone component, is that added benefit of getting an extra 25% property tax incentive.
I agree. I mean, that's something that, a business is going to have to pay every year. And that really, it starts to add up. It will improve the profit situation and make the business that much more valuable. And it really amps up the return potential on an opportunity zone investment. So we'll be getting more into that in the future webinars, which I've just outlined a few subjects that we're looking at, more into federal tax credits, clean energy and manufacturing programs, deep dives into Department of Defense and Department of Energy programs, another detailed one on opportunity zones that we'll be doing soon, some more on state and local assistance incentives, and maybe an area that we'll be doing a couple of different discussions on is how do you integrate multiple incentives, and what do these look like practically? What actually happens? What are the benefits for the business at each level? So with that, we can take any questions, and I've got our contact information if anyone would like to shoot an email to us. But I think otherwise we'll have them in the chat box, or if people want to just start speaking up, that's acceptable too.
I'm looking in the chat box, and it doesn't seem that anyone has left any questions so far. But if someone would like to unmute and begin to ask questions, it's fine at this point. Not all at once now. Well, it seems
you have our emails.
Yes.
We were told, or you were told, how to access this on in our YouTube channel. You can also get our emails through the website. But any questions, especially if you have a project and you want to ask something specific,
we
reach
do
out
have
to
a
us directly.
question
Go ahead,
now.
Andrew.
We do have one question. This question is, do you mind commenting on the time that is needed ahead of securing the incentives?
Well, that's a complicated one. It depends on the incentive. For federal incentives, you'll have kind of a revolving timeline of when you can qualify for loans. To my knowledge, one of the more sensitive ones for the incentives is opportunity zones. You have to, and that's really a time constraint on the actual investor coming in. Essentially, how the opportunity zones incentive works is if, say, David Katopody have a capital gain of $20 million, which is exactly what I need to qualify for the opportunity zone incentive tax abatement with Eric. I have 6 months from realizing that capital gain to go put it into a qualified opportunity fund, and then another 6 months after that to invest it down into the business. So that's from a project investor type of viewpoint. Now, if you're a business owner, you don't need to invest that much. You could come in with a $50 capital gain and say, that's my starting equity in my business, and I'm going to start a new business, and we're going to occupy in TexAmericas Center. And we can, we have all sorts of ways to make these types of incentives work together. For tax credits, it depends. For example, the 48C program, which is less well developed, is mostly a white paper program. The tax credits are awarded kind of in tranches. And so that one, they're closing their tranche, and then they're probably going to open another one sometime in the early fall, certainly before the election, because they have a whole bunch of tax credit money to spend, and they haven't been able to give it out fast enough. So they have open solicitations for those tax credits, and there's probably going to be a third one. Then for some of the more established credits, you're looking at, in general, 6 months of lead time to start really thinking about it, potentially a year. But those credits are going to be an important part of the entire development process for a building, for example. You're going to have those tax credits awarded before you start development of the building, because you're going to use the credits to do things like implement solar panels or solar walls or whatever type of energy efficient technology that might be needed. So it really depends on what you're doing and what types of incentives are going to be in place.
And I'll add to that. I'll pick three that are locally controlled and managed. So you have the property tax abatement programs through TC and Bowie County. You have the goods in transit, which is an inventory tax exemption. And then you have the pilot if TexAmericas Center owns the property. So let's start with the Texarkana College in Bowie County. So these are already set up. There are rules or guidelines for how these will move forward. You're really looking at a 60 to 90 day time frame in order to secure those property tax abatements. They already have laid out what you can ask for, which is approximately a 50% reduction in the value of any new project that meets job creation and investment guidelines. And again, those are all accessible. As you look at the goods in transit, the goods in transit on the inventory, that you're going to work that out because it's already been passed. You're going to work that out with the Bowie County Assessor's Office. You have to look at what the value of the inventory was in your warehouse on January 1 of that year. You file your rendering noting which are possible of receiving the exemption and which aren't by April of that year, and you pay taxes on the ones that you're required to pay taxes on. And then finally, the pilot agreement. If you have TexAmericas Center build and lease a building to you, you have the ability to work out a pilot agreement with us. The good thing is that we offer as a standard part of any lease that we do a 10% reduction on what your property tax valuation would be through the pilot agreement. So anyone, whether they're creating jobs or not, pays 90% of what they would pay if they were an owner. The other component is if you meet certain job creation and investment thresholds, we also can offer up to 50% of a reduction in that value. And then if you reach the other threshold for job creation and investment, it's negotiable. So all of that is put together at the same time that we are negotiating your build-to-suit or your lease occupancy. Typically, we can, if it's a lease building, we can put that together in 60 days or less. I pride myself on getting most of my leases to the board for approval within a 30-day time frame. The staff here is not happy about that, but that's what we target and that's what we almost always achieve.
And I'll just comment with one more thing. Really these incentives, from state and local up to federal, they can benefit a company of any size at any stage in its life cycle, depending on what sort of industry you're in. There's certain things that you can benefit from, irrespective of value or revenue. And so it's something to consider. Like we talked about the story with the startup Rocasa Organics. That's a company that I can think of, as Eric was talking about it, I could think of several incentives that a company like that could benefit from. So certainly, if you have questions, ask them. If you have interest, we'd be happy to talk to them about it.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for setting in. We are hoping to do this more. The title of it is getting more out of public incentives. That's our goal. We want to help you understand how to take a full advantage of these things. Selfishly, we want you to take advantage of them on our property. So if TexAmericas Center can help you either as one of the sites that's being considered or the site that you want to try to put a project on, please reach out to us. And again, we try to bring all of these tools to bear on every project. We want to move at the speed of business, and we want to provide you every incentive or form of assistance you are entitled to for locating on our property.
I echo what Eric is saying too. Thank y'all all for logging on to this webinar. We really enjoyed y'all.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank y'all.